What's good, YouTube homies? So today we're going to be doing a review slash analysis of the art. I'm calling it art form, not a manga. We're calling this art. The piece of art known as Aku no Hana, or Flowers of Evil, written by Shuzo Oshimi. This book is so good, guys. And I've gotten even more of an appreciation after I did some background digging on the author and found some interviews and quotes and things like that from him about some of the themes in the work that I want to share with you guys that I feel like really enriches it, you know. This book to me is so good because it's I guess it's a coming of age story, right? Which like we all know about and have seen in like some form or another. But what makes this one so good is I feel like it really dives into like the darker parts of what it means to go through like adolescence and puberty and like that kind of stuff, right? Where we see a lot of sanitized representations of like childhood and like teenage life and different things like that in media, where like it delves into things like, oh, I'm getting into arguments with my friends, or like my parents don't understand me. But a lot of works are really afraid to get into the nitty gritty of what we know like puberty can be, which is really shitty, you know. Like all of us past a certain age, and everybody that's going through it, right? Like any person that passes a certain point in their life knows how shitty it is to be a teenager at some point, man. And just like all the thoughts and feelings and just the nihilism that comes with certain understandings about life when you get to a certain point, right? Like it can become such a dark and just sometimes seemingly hopeless place when you get older. And I really appreciate Oshimi's willingness to dive into those themes. Now, I'll give a brief synopsis of our story. Its protagonist is Tako, and he is a middle school student who is like he's super, I guess, smitten. He's super into this girl named Saiki, who's seen as like the hottest, most perfect girl in class. You know, he pedestalizes her. He puts her as being like not like other people. He considers her his muse, his reason for like writing and like doing the things that he does, and he has like almost a borderline obsession of her, you know, when he would like nothing more than to talk to her. And one day he sees Saiki's gym clothes laying on the floor, and being a horny middle school student, he's like, I gotta do this. And he grabs the clothes, steals them, and takes them back to his house, right? And then the next day school begins, and it's kind of funny because it gets blown up as this big story, right? Where like Saiki can't find her gym clothes, and then like, we got a pervert on the loose. There's a pervert coming in stealing gym clothes. And there's this story that gets spread, right, about some like weird, creepy guy with glasses that like snuck into the school and was like, like took Saiki's gym clothes. And then the whole time your boy Tako was over there like, he's just dying a little bit inside. And there's one person that's seen him take the clothes though, right? There's a girl named Nakamura who watches Tako take those clothes. She calls him out on it and basically blackmails him, telling like, hey, I'll give you a choice, right? You sign this contract and become my slave. Basically, you do whatever I tell you to do. And if you do that, maybe I won't tell everybody about like you stealing those gym clothes. But if you disagree, guess who's gonna find out that you're the biggest pervert in the school, and your reputation will be ruined. And he's like, ah, and has all like this middle school angst, and I can't believe it. And then he agrees, right? And so the story follows basically his descent into madness and just nihilism and stuff through his interactions with Nakamura, right? Where we see a lot of there's a lot of complex relationships in this manga, right? Because Tako doesn't just hate Nakamura for the blackmail. Like at first he does, right? But like their relationship slowly like morphs and shifts into like him realizing that he can understand Nakamura from the standpoint that like he doesn't feel like he fits into society either, right? He feels like an outcast. He feels like nobody gets him because he's like an avid reader. He reads like these philosophical books, and the name of the manga, right, Flowers of Evil, is taken from a novel by Baudelaire, the French author, and that's his favorite book, he says, right? And he just has this overall feeling of being like alienated from normal people, which he can relate to Nakamura with this, right? So like it goes from being just this this sort of leeching, like I'm forcing you to do this to get my kicks relationship with Nakamura into like this weird like codependent like coalescing on Takao's side, because Nakamura is just like she has the reins, right? Like she's the mama, she's the queen, she's like got the whip, and then Takao was like, yes mistress. Like he's basically doing whatever she was. He becomes like her loyal obedient dog and servant in a sense. But there's a love and just a sort of connection that he feels with Nakamura that he doesn't feel with anybody else. And then we get this sort of like love triangle thing that kind of gets sets up between Nakamura, Takao, and Saiki, where he kind of has to choose between the outcast but kindred spirit relationship that he has with Nakamura, that feeling that like nobody else gets us but we get us, and we're gonna find our own place in the world kind of thing, versus the affection from Saiki, because eventually Saiki like sees the sort of person that Takao is. She becomes interested in him, and like these guys have like a sort of relationship going on, and Saiki to him represents like society basically, right? It represents like all the norms, like the perfection and what it means to be a good member of civilization basically and fit in with your peers. That's what Saiki represents, right? And he's kind of like juggling these few things as it goes on. And what we see throughout the story, man, is just how our mindset when we're a teenager and going through puberty, right, and like developing as a person, how our like I guess our deficiencies, or how our weakness and our like lack of knowing what we want, our lack of understanding about the world can lead us to all these different places, right? And sometimes we end up saying and doing things that we can't go back on, that end up really shaping who we become as a person into adulthood, right? Because that's the cool thing about this manga, right? That's the cool thing about this story, is that it doesn't just take place during this middle school time. It goes into the future. Like there's a time skip where we see Takao in his high school days, where we see all the things that culminated during his time in middle school, and like the crazy stuff that happens towards the climax of his middle school arc, and how he has to live with this now as a high school student. We get to see that, man, which isn't something that always happens with manga and stories. We don't always get to see the after effects and dive into how this shaped our main character, right? But we get that with this story. And one of Oshimi's goals, right, taken from a quote that I found about Aku no Hana, was he wanted to really express like the chaos and the sense of lack of knowing, and the importance of puberty in our lives as we grow up, right? About how that time of like transitioning from what it means to be a kid, that loss of innocence, and then turning into an adult, and like how those transitions are sometimes blurry, or like how do we know when we've made that transition from being a kid into an adult, right? Like, are there any hard lines? Do we ever reach that point in our lives? And what I want to do now is read the quote, man. So give me a second, let me pull up my laptop here, man. I want to read you guys this quote because I feel like it really encapsulates what Oshimi was trying to get across in the story. So let me pull this up here. Oh no, all right. And then I think I'll put the quote up on the screen and stuff as well. But Oshimi states that, when does puberty end? In my opinion, puberty is a dark period that one experiences when one begins to become an adult. That is, when we are no longer as carefree as elementary children, because a form of self-consciousness is emerging in us. The beginning of this phase is easy to recognize. We begin to develop sexual characteristics, change the voice, begin menstruation, grow body hair. Mutations in the body have a direct impact on the self-consciousness, modifying it. But the end of puberty is not so easy to spot. There are several people who, despite having reached middle age with baldness, wrinkles, white hair, continue to have the same self-awareness of the period of puberty. The beginning comes whether you like it or not, but the end does not come by itself. It is you who must find it, and I think this manga talks about the discovery of the end of puberty. Oh, so good, right? So Oshimi gives us like a direct peek at his line of thought when he was making the story, right, about how Takao serves as an example, and not just him, right, but like of the stories of all these characters. We get to see the beginning of puberty of them, right, the beginning of that loss of innocence and entering into the adult world and what that looks like for them. And then we see them develop across a period of time, with some of them having arrested development, right, with some of them being the same sort of self-conscious, nihilistic, undeveloping people that they were at this beginning portion of their lives and becoming adults who also have that exact same mindset, but with some of the characters developing past that, you know, like being able to recognize the faults of their past, accept the things that they went through, but try to move forward and create something more, you know. And this is a wholehearted belief that I have, man, is if you guys watch any videos on the channel, I've talked about it, that maturity is something that is earned. It's not a given. You know, when we talk about becoming an adult, you can have an 18-year-old adult and a 50-year-old kid, you know, and I think that's why I can relate to this work so much. And it's so cool to see that, like, I'm not just like spitballing, you know, like this is what Oshimi was really trying to convey, is the fact that we have to really process our experiences and change and develop and think about the person that we're going to become and what we want to do with our lives and how we're going to act. These are conscious decisions to become an adult. They are conscious decisions to become mature. You know, it's not just an automatic given that it's going to happen with time. All of us are going to reach puberty, you know, like all of us are going to have that beginning stage where like our mind and stuff is changing. But so many people just stop at that point in their lives, you know, like so many people just never develop past that teenage mindset of like, oh, the world is just out to get me, like everybody just wants to see me hurt. They don't understand the pain that I'm going through, and this becomes like their attitude at which they take on life, you know. They become eternal victims in a sense, right? Like they have like this victim label that they put on themselves, and sometimes consciously, sometimes like unconsciously, it affects every interaction they have with the world, right? It poisons their relationships, it poisons their happiness, and that's why like depression and mental illness can be such a major thing when we talk about like lack of maturity level, right? It's not just only about you having to grow up to conform to societal standards. Like, no, that's not what it's about at all. Like, the reason I feel like development and maturity as a person is so significant, man, is because if we don't move past that, then our ability to create, to bring something new and good to the world, our ability to positively impact ourselves and the world around us becomes stunted, because we're not accepting reality anymore. You know, we're living in our own bubble. And I feel like that's exactly what like this period of puberty and adolescence is, right? Where like you have your views of the world, you live in your own bubble, and you see things a certain way, and that's good for a time, right? Because we're finding ourselves. Like, we all need that sort of time where we can kind of close in, be completely selfish, and think about like the world, and like feeling as though we don't have our place, because at that point in time we don't feel that way. But Oshimi talks a little bit about the fact that it's important for us, if possible, man, and not all of us are going to get there, but it's a significant thing to be able to take the next step, right? And to move past like those childhood traumas or like those childhood viewpoints and do what you need to do so that you can progress as a person, you know, so you're not stuck as like a 70 or 80-year-old adolescent, man, because it's easy to do that, you know. And this story showcases like what can happen to individuals when they don't, you know, like how they can grow up and like they go after the same partners that they used to when they were a middle schooler. Maybe their mindset that they had in middle school sticks with them into adulthood, and now they're suffering from depressions and feelings of isolation. It just really goes deep, man, into some really cool subjects, and I'm so glad that it does, because it's something rare, man. It's something that you don't see. And also it dives into the themes of what it means to be weird, you know, right? Like what it means to be an outcast, you know, the word hentai, you know, which commonly gets associated with pornography and like perversion. But from what I was reading, man, it also, like its other definition, it just means like abnormality, you know, or to be set apart. And Oshimi talks about this as well, which is, I'm going to bring up one more quote, guys. and then we're done with the quotes, man, and I'll let you guys go. But just finding these quotes directly from the author made me so happy, man, because sometimes it's hard to find like those direct lines into the thought process of what the author was trying to tell you. You don't always get that. All right, guys, so This time for real, Oshimi states us, what does pervert mean, right? The word hentai conceals the intention of piling up in a category what we cannot understand so that we can feel comfortable. But human beings have all, some more or less, a component of perversion in their soul. I would already be happy if reading this manga you said laughing, oh, what a pervert. But if I managed to make you think even a little, what does the word pervert mean to me? I would be happy to have drawn it, right? So the other major theme in this read is about what it means, what it actually means to call somebody perverted or different or abnormal, right? And does that actually even have any significance considering the fact that we're all effed up in some way? You know, and that's why I feel what Oshimi was getting across as well, right? Is that through this reading, it's easy to see these characters and be like, whoa, man, what a weirdo. Who would do that? But somewhere like deep in our heart of hearts, right? Somewhere in our soul, if we're being completely honest with ourselves, we've all done effed up things or been in an effed up place in our lives, right? Where we could easily be considered a pervert or a weirdo too. So he wants us to shed a little bit of light on like why we would classify other people as this. How are we going to cast stones, right? How are we going to cast stones at others when in reality, if we're doing honest self-reflection, this word could be a moniker or a label giving to all of us, right? So that's pretty damn cool to me, you know, because I'm a wholehearted believer in that we are. I don't know what a normal person looks like, you know, like what is normalcy? What is normality? What does it mean to be a normal person? I think that I don't even know if it exists, you know, because we're all strange and weird individuals in some sense, you know, like I think that there's more that brings us together than sets us apart, but we all have something about us that to somebody else could be considered strange or weird. So you have to be careful about labeling people, right? You have to be careful about putting like people in a box saying these are good people, these are bad people, when in reality, like, are your labels accurate? You know, like you're only going off of your own personal biases. You're only going off of like what maybe others have told you, like societal implications. But if you look at yourself, it becomes really difficult to cast judgment on somebody because you start to realize that I kind of got my own problems too, you know? So happiness, that's the wrong story. Flowers and people, we're gonna talk about happiness some other time. Aku no Hana is so good, man. I've heard really good things about the anime. I haven't watched the anime. I think it only goes through like the first arc of the story though. Like there's a whole second half that I don't think the anime covers. So for me, I'm recommending the manga because the art's amazing. You get just a great look at the story, but you can check out either one. I've heard the anime adaptation is actually really good. But if any of this stuff that I've talked about is interesting to you, you should check out this manga, man. The dialogue, the themes in the story, the characters. It has a lot to say even past just the things that I just mentioned. You know, there's a ton of other themes in there too that I didn't even cover in this. But if any of that stuff that I talked about is something that you like care about or you want to see a representation of, it's a classic, man. This is a hella good manga. It's an extremely good series, so can't recommend it enough. That being said, appreciate you guys for listening. Come check me out in the comments. Let's have a conversation. I hope to see you guys in the next video.